Becoming a change maker. Introduction to activism. So something that everybody needs to consider when they're entering this idea, this concept, is that nobody needs to give you permission. No one's going to hire you. There's no application process. Nobody's in charge of you. No one can fire you. You're in control of how you structure yourself, how you design yourself. There's no wrong way to do this. If the people that are doing it in your area, if you don't mix with them, if you don't like them, if you don't understand them, you don't have to even join them. You can do your own thing. Activism is open to everybody, free to everyone, and for everyone. In as many different ways as we care about the people and the things around us, there are as many ways that we can motivate ourselves to be the person who creates change. So it doesn't matter what thoughts, ideas, opinions, or beliefs that you have, as long as what you do creates exposure, knowledge, and potentially motivates change, then what you're doing is activism. So whether it's speech, a demonstration, letters, fundraising, building homes, registering voters, educating people who don't have the same access that you have, even getting out there, hosting events that focus around things that you're interested in. If you're able to fundraise while doing that, then you can turn that into activism. So even a video gaming competition can be activism. Even sitting at home, connecting to people on social media can be activism. So before we can really start to focus on how we're going to make change, we have to understand what the structures are that maintain the systems that we want to change. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of wasted effort and a lot of spinning the wheels if we don't really get where the administration of the power is. So we need to have some sort of concept about the structure of our local and our national government so we can most effectively push our effort for these changes. So just really quickly, it's going to be a painful reminder to your elementary and middle school days, but keeping this in mind will help you direct your efforts. At the national level, there are three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. And let's keep this in mind. At the executive level, there's armed forces, foreign affairs, and federal prisons. Congress, they create and modify bills, and the Supreme Court interprets laws and settles disputes. So keep those in mind because they're going to repeat themselves almost at every level. At the state level, they maintain state prisons just like how the executive federal level maintains federal prisons. So the governor is in charge of the state prisons, implements the laws and the policies, maintains a budget. The legislative level creates and modifies bills and laws, just like at the congressional level, they create and they modify bills and laws. The judicial level and the Supreme Court interprets the state laws and settles disputes. And as we drill down and get a little bit closer to what we are a little bit more familiar with, counties have commissioners or administrators or an executive, and their duties are to appoint or to remove chairs, to set a budget, or to veto. A similar power that the executive has at the prior two levels. Legislative, the county council, they can create and modify laws or ordinances, and a county judge can interpret the laws, is in charge of the sheriff's office or is in charge of the jails. And at the level of city or a town, at the executive level is the mayor. They preserve order, maintain the police departments, handle appointments, can have veto power, and can break ties in council and propose a budget. Council, that same repeat pattern in their powers, they can create or modify ordinances and regulations on the local level, or enact a proposed budget, so they have the ability to allocate funds to different programs and causes throughout the local level. That's important to keep in mind, because I think a lot of people don't understand where and how the money is controlled and spent, and who is directly in charge of making sure that the money is spent in your section of town, on your streets, on your playgrounds, and in your neighborhoods. So I believe a lot of people have a default opinion that everything goes through the mayor. But now, once we understand there's a division of power, we can focus our efforts on some of the people that are more directly connected to how that money is spent. And on the judicial level, the municipal courts interpret laws, and they preside over the legal proceedings. And what I'm going to do now that you've seen them all is I'm just going to let you see them all one more time, and I'm going to give you all a moment to just absorb that. National level, executive, president and the cabinet, legislative, Congress, and the judicial is the Supreme Court. At the state level, the executive is the governor, legislative is the state legislator, senators, and the district representatives. Judicial is the state Supreme Court. Next level down, county, the executive is the commissioner, the executive, or the county administrator. The legislative would be the county council, and the judicial would be the county judge. And at the city, township, or town level, the executive would be the mayor. The legislative level would be the legislative position would be the council, and the judicial position would be the municipal court. So that's how the checks and balances loosely work at those different levels. Now, once we get down to our local level and where our budget is being spent, that is part of the city or the town council. Assisting the city or the town council are a number of boards and committees and departments. So they have a general budget committee, a school committee or a school board, law enforcement policy. So even though the mayor may be in charge of law enforcement, a lot of the policy comes from the council. Zoning, bail, taxes, development and public works, blight, and ordinances and local rules. Um, so what we need to keep in mind is that even though the council exists, we can still get a lot of work done by figuring out who is on those boards and committees, approaching them and discussing with them policy that can be applied at that level. So there's a lot of things that can be done in cohesion with these boards and committees rather than in opposition to these boards and committees. And to be honest, most of these boards and committees have open positions that theoretically we could just walk into and attend without any votes to get us in that position of power. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Motivating members of our communities to sit on these boards and these committees may entirely circumvent the need for activism in the forms that we're most familiar with it. It's very likely that we could just directly participate in the political process before the need for any sort of oppositional activism. So judges have to keep in mind that they have control over sentence length and bail amount. And in Pennsylvania, a lot of people can run for judges at their local level without a law degree, without any formal law experience. In Pennsylvania, to be a magistrate judge, all you really need to do is take a course from the state and to be elected. So there's another way that you can directly impact one of the most publicly regarded senses of injustice rather than protesting. You could just become a judge and advocate for the fair administration of law from the highest position of power, the most direct position of power. No one's stopping us. So we need to keep in mind and educate each other on what's available to us, because that's a paid position, a very well paid position that has an immediate impact on your community. School superintendents, that's another similar situation where people could theoretically get involved from the inside and make a change from the inside through the political process. Controller and comptroller, that's another important appointment. This one, on the other hand, where you are that final point where the checks are signed for the community, or you're also directly involved in applying for financing, federal grants, so on and so forth, to develop your community. So for the pandemic, for example, there have been situations where there were a lot of controllers or comptrollers that were not applying for the grants and the assistance that their towns and townships, renters or landlords were entitled for. So the eviction situation that we're going to be coming up against very soon could have been avoided if there are people who are very proactive and passionate about responding to their duties and the situation that we were all facing. So that's another reason why it is important for us to consider participating on the inside, because there are a lot of people that sit in these positions or have been voted into these positions that they don't care. They're not necessarily opposed to anyone or anything, but they just don't care, you know. And all of us are here because we care a lot. All right. So the most powerful element about one of the most powerful elements about forming these organizations is our ability to network and our reach and growth once we do network. Um, Forming a strong network allows us to get the word out and to create a task force or to spread information rapidly. So when you are in one of these organizations or when you're forming one of these organizations, you're going to want to create several databases, and you're going to want to make sure that those databases are populated with the contact information for churches, synagogues, and mosques. You're going to want to make sure that those databases are populated with media sources such as television, radio, local magazines, and perhaps popular local influencers. You're going to want to make sure that all of the companion organizations or allied groups, any group that might be sympathetic to your cause or might have an overlapping cause, that you have their information readily available. And you also want to make sure that you have a list of passionate and potential volunteers, because sometimes activism is slow, but other times it is a lightning rod and it needs to be taken with immediacy. And having these databases prepared allows you to send out press releases or calls to action with no hesitation. So why would you want to create an organization rather than just having a group? Um, why would you like to formalize your organization and take it to the next level? So organizations are legal entities. They're taxable legal entities. They're registered with the IRS for many reasons. They allow you to protect your members. So if there was a legal action that was to take place, rather than having your individual members sued, the organization can be represented and maintain liability. They can receive donations from other organizations and institutions, and those donations are tax deductible, which is a major incentive for a lot of companies. You can have a proper registered address, and for all intents and purposes, you can function as a business, including setting up special business or banking accounts. You can work with universities and set up accredited internship programs. You can apply for grants with federal institutions. You can set up large scale events, and because you are an effective business, you can also receive a permit and insurance. The permit is important because when you have a public gathering without a permit, anyone, including law enforcement, can easily disperse you, and they will be in the right to do so. However, if you have a permit, then you have permission from the city. And once you have permission and protection from the city, instead of being dispersed, the city affords you a certain degree of legal protection to be there. Many venues will only rent or host events with organizations. And once you actually have an organization, you guys can bid for contracts, can apply for loans, and treat yourself in many other ways, just like a business, including paying your members or employing your members. So the fundamentals of creating and growing a group are also some of the basic blocks that you're going to want to take when you're growing an organization. So you're going to want to make sure that you have all the major social media sites, and you're going to want to keep in mind that Facebook has a certain demographic, TikTok has a certain demographic, LinkedIn has a certain demographic, and you would be selling yourself short to only represent yourself on one or two of these places. You're going to need to feel comfortable exploring, branching out, and formatting your posts and your information to fit multiple sites and sources. You're going to want to make sure that you have the ability to reach out to local print and radio advertisement if you should have an event. You're going to want to make sure that using your social media, you post the group, the events, and any of your relevant posts to any of the allied networks that you have. Groups can be free form and non-committal, but organizations do need a little bit more structure. As a matter of fact, even during the paperwork, you do need certain amounts of members to hold certain positions in the leadership, like a president, a secretary, and a treasurer. You'd like to welcome your collaborating groups to post and network on your platform as well. And you can also search and scour your county, your city, your town, your state, the neighboring territories for allied groups, organizations, and causes to reach out and build those bridges, as there are a lot of people that are going to find that they belong with you as well, or perhaps with you instead. When you are starting up that organization and transferring or transitioning from a group to an actual nonprofit, you're going to want to file or start an LLC with the state. That's one form that you can get on your state's website. You're going to want to register the LLC with the IRS, and you'll receive an EIN, a tax number. Once you have that EIN, you can start bank accounts, you can hire employees, and a lot of business opens up to you. And once you actually form that LLC, then you can register for the C3 or the C4. The C3 specializes in education-based programming, and the C4 specializes in political advocacy. These forms, they are a little bit lengthier, but they are, of course, worth it because of all the doors that they open up for you. Okay, so we've gone through the political element, we've gone through some of the formal elements. Let's talk about a forgotten element that is immensely powerful: grants. All right, Mommy, where do grants come from? So federal, state, county, and local governments, they can all produce grants. Companies and corporations may also produce a grant. Financial institutions, such as banks, may produce a grant. funds and foundations, which are often groups of individuals or companies that contribute money to sponsor causes. They can produce grants, and charitable organizations or community foundations may also produce grants. The reasons that they produce grants are because a lot of these financial institutions are obligated to donate a portion of their revenue every single year to community development. Or corporations or private citizens, when they donate, they can deduct up to 25% from their taxable income, which is nice for them because that gets them to reduce their tax bracket and pay an entirely different tax rate if that's something that they can afford to do. For nonprofits and member organizations, they are not allowed to generate any sort of excessive taxable income. They're supposed to not perform in a way that generates income. So some of those groups that do generate a lot of money will turn around and take that excess money and turn it into a grant. And some of those will tend to fund student loans or other nonprofit organizations. So let's talk about exactly what a grant is. A grant is essentially a donation that does not need to be returned or paid back as long as it is spent in a way that the issuer agrees that you can spend it. Part of the wonderful thing about grants for organizations is that it enables an organization to perhaps pay for an office location, pay for their programming, or even to hire and pay their own employees or members as an employee.